All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Jamie Henn. I'm with Stop the Oil Profiteering, which is a national campaign to hold big oil accountable, stop the obscene price gouging that's happening across this country, and pass a windfall profits tax that would put money back in the pockets of the American people. We're here this week because big oil companies like Chevron, Shell, Exxon, BP are announcing obscene profits that they have robbed from the American people. Because let's be clear, that's what this is, a robbery. Did big oil invent some new product over the last year? Did they invent some new technology that's providing a social good? No, they've been doing the exact same thing that they have over the last decade, which is continuing to profit at the expense of working families across this country. The result, over $200 billion that this industry has taken out of the pockets of hardworking Americans in every state across this nation. $200 billion, each one of them earned at the expense of people who are trying to make ends meet, people who are struggling to pay their utility bills and struggling with high prices at the pump. $200 billion. That's 200 billion reasons why it's time to end subsidies for this industry. 200 billion reasons why it's time to finally pass a windfall profits tax that would put money back in our pockets. And 200 billion reasons why we're here today with some of the leading members of Congress who are pushing to hold this industry accountable. We've heard all the lies that big oil is talking about a windfall profits tax, saying that it will raise prices, that it will hurt production, that it will cause the stars to fall from the sky. We know that those are lies. We know that this tax has been passed before, that it works, that it is common sense policy, and that it's what the American people want. So today, we are going to hear from some of the leading voices in Congress who are unafraid to stand up to big oil, who are unafraid to fight for the American people, and who are ready to pass the type of policies we need to put money back in the pockets of hardworking Americans. So, without further ado, it's my honor to pass it to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you all for being here. You got to get the history of this right to begin with, and that is that as the Russian war machine crossed the Ukrainian border, the big oil propaganda machine went into operation to try to blame this price gouging on President Biden. None of that is true. They raised their prices because they're part of an international cartel that gets to raise prices. And they took advantage of that moment to raise their prices. And they pocketed tens of billions of dollars, actually hundreds of billions of dollars, out of consumers' pockets. And we know that we were right, that they were lying when they blamed this on the Biden administration and when we insisted that this was price gouging, because the one area where the oil companies have to tell the truth is in their profit and loss statements. They can't lie about that, or the SEC and their shareholders jump down their throats. So we know truthfully how much money they made by gouging consumers. We're working to try to take that back with a clawback provision of excess profits. It's a pretty reasonable idea. Indeed, it's so reasonable that the conservative government in the United Kingdom passed just such a law. But in Rhode Island, the Republican Party is the wholly owned subsidiary of the fossil fuel industry, so they won't follow Boris Johnson and the conservatives' lead. They will follow the lead of their big oil donors. So we have to continue to keep the pressure on and make absolutely sure that we tell the story of what truly happened here and how false the campaign to blame the Biden administration was. I'll close by directing a thought to the administration, which is, when you're looking at how to fund the $11 billion international loss and damage pledge that Joe Biden made, you might want to think about the $200 billion that the fossil fuel industry just extracted in excess profits. They are not stepping up to make good in international loss and damage for the harm that they cause. They have to be held accountable. And speaking of holding people accountable, nobody is much better at that in the Senate than my friend Ed Markey, who dates on climate and environmental issues back to the Waxman-Markey bill and is a true champion. So I'm just the warm-up act for Ed Markey.
Thank you, Sheldon. And we're all here to talk about Sheldon's bill, you know, and actually we can all be carbon dated back to the beginning of this issue. So I thank you, Sheldon, so much for your great leadership. And thank you for having this incredible press conference today, the leadership that the consumer advocates are providing. We know that the CEOs of the big oil companies are lining their pockets with the hard-earned cash of American consumers. And we just want to thank Stop the Oil Profiteering for bringing us together today. Thank you to its founder and director, Jamie Henn, for his leadership, for all of your leadership. And I'm proud to stand here today with my colleagues, ensuring that we bring more and more attention to this issue. We're here today because big oil are reporting eye-popping fourth quarter profits while they price gouge working and middle-class families at the pump. This is going to be horrifying, but let's look at the facts. Big Oil's annual 2022 profits are expected to reach $190 billion, shattering their previous record in 2011 by nearly 50%. Can I say that again? Their profits this year are 50% higher than their highest year ever recorded. And at the same time, average wages for American workers have only increased by 17% over the past 45 years. Chevron just gave its top executives and shareholders a $75 billion bonus by buying back stocks. But for the average American workers, the average salary is about $56,000. The average hourly wage is about $11. And Big Oil, just in the first 3 quarters of last year, before the Chevron announcement, spent $60 billion on stock buybacks. But it is, unfortunately, only the wealthiest in our nation that are going to benefit from it. Exxon just reported $56 billion in profits in 2022. That's the highest in the history of ExxonMobil. Chevron just topped their biggest ever profit. It goes on. And as Senator Whitehouse said, the industry is trying to lay this off on the war between Russia and Ukraine. Well, somehow or other, none of the shareholders of these companies are in any way suffering from that war. In fact, they are the ones who are profiteering over the war in Ukraine. If the industry had wanted to, they could have used all of those excess profits in order to keep the price of gasoline at the pump lower. Instead, they took it as an excuse to tip consumers upside down at the pump every single day of 2022. That's who they are as an industry. And that's why we need to ensure that we pass the legislation that Senator Whitehouse is proposing, because we cannot in any way expect there to be any relief in any other possible avenue. So from my perspective, this is a moment where we have to stand up, we have to fight. The Republican Party obviously is the GOP, and that GOP stands for Gas and Oil Party. So we're announcing today the beginning of this battle in order to ensure that the gas and oil industry is made accountable. And joining us today is a great consumer advocate, environmentalist, the great senator from Oregon, Jeff Merkley.
So petro profiteering is crushing Americans at the pump. The 2021 profits were $205 billion. And 2022, Exxon has more than doubled its profits. In 2022, Chevron has more than doubled its profits. In 2022, Valero has about a 10-fold increase in its profits. If you take the total profits and you divide it by the billions of gallons of gas sold at the pump, you don't end up with 5 cents or 10 cents per gallon. You don't end up with 50 cents or $1 per gallon. You get in the vicinity of $2 or more per gallon. That's the size of the profit that we are talking about. The collaboration, the collusion between these major oil companies is extracting an extraordinary profit on every single gallon of gas. So, it's wrong for Americans, and what is right is to pass a windfall profits tax. Now, these companies, which in 2021 had more than the $200 billion and may have far more than that, estimates go up to $300 billion for the whole set of oil companies for 2022, this last year. They're not investing that money in renewables or any other productive, good enterprise. Instead, they're investing it in disinformation. They're buying scientists who have degrees for hire to promote myths about renewables, and they're putting the money in their pocket with these stock buyback schemes. Chevron, $75 billion in stock buybacks on top of the $25 billion they just completed. $100 billion. What could $100 billion do to take on climate chaos? So the windfall profits tax is exactly the right thing to do, and I am pleased to join my colleagues in promoting it. So I am delighted to be handing this off to Representative Ro Khanna from the House, a true champion for the climate and for America.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Thank you for your leadership. We've got the all-star team here, I guess, with Merkley, Markey, and Sheldon Whitehouse on climate in the Senate, and there's not much I can add to their leadership. Their decades of leadership on this issue. I'll just say very simply the contrast between what the Democrats want to do and the Republicans want to do. We're saying the big oil companies have made these record profits. Unlike other industries that make profits, they're making profits because of the war. That's why they're profiteering. That's the difference between them and other industries. They're actually taking advantage of a war in Ukraine, of the human rights violations there by Putin, and they're saying, let's use this opportunity to have price volatility and make record profits. And we're saying tax them on those profits to put back money in the pockets of the American people. And my House Republican colleagues are saying, actually, let's have a national sales tax on all Americans. Let's actually tax them more for the gas they're paying, the food they're paying, for the clothing they're paying for. They want to have a 30% increase of a national sales tax on Americans while they're paying more on the pump. And the contrast couldn't be any clearer. We're for taxing the big oil companies and putting their money back in the pockets of ordinary Americans. They're for taxing the very working Americans who are hurting today because of the price at the pump. We have led, with Sheldon Whitehouse's leadership and Markey's leadership in the House, hearings that exposed, as Senator Merkley said, that these companies knew about climate change decades ago, and they lied about it, blatantly lied about it. And today they're lying about making renewable investments when they absolutely have not done that and are actually entrenching a greater fossil fuel infrastructure. And I'm looking forward to the Senate now taking up that work, Sheldon Whitehouse and others in their committees, to continue to hold big oil accountable. But this is common sense legislation. We need to pass the windfall profits tax. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie, for your leadership.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. My name is Dr. Murner, and I'm the lead scientist at the Union of Concerned Scientists. While people in the United States have suffered from financial pressures and inflation of high gas prices for the past year, The fossil fuel sector has been taking home an average of $3 billion in profits every day for 50 years. With profits soaring and damage to the climate and communities rapidly intensifying, the need for corporate accountability is more urgent now than ever. A growing body of peer-reviewed attribution science has provided irrefutable and damning evidence that major oil and gas companies bear an outsized responsibility for physical impacts to our environment, including temperature increase, sea level rise, and ocean acidification. Leveraging this cutting-edge science, climate lawsuits worldwide are helping people hold private sector actors accountable for their role in accelerating climate change and its devastating impacts on the environment, public health, and the economy. 2023 is forecast to be an eventful year for thousands of climate litigation cases currently filed in local, state, national, and international courts. In the United States, fossil fuel companies are using jurisdictional battles to deliberately delay these cases to keep them out of the state's courts where they're filed, where the people that are most impacted's concerns can really be heard. If this delay continues, there is space for Congress to really step up into this area. In 2022, the Biden administration has a unique opportunity to support groundbreaking climate litigation and follow through on President Biden's campaign promise to strategically support climate change-related lawsuits against polluters. Both Congress and the Biden administration should also continue to investigate in the fossil fuel deception and greenwashing. We're grateful for our champions for climate action, many of whom are standing with us here today, who are committed to seeing these powerful corporations be held accountable for their actions. In the wake of yet another record-setting profit for fossil fuel companies, the Union of Concerned Scientists is ramping up its work to advance the field of attribution science, to strengthen existing climate accountability cases, and inform potentially new cases. We are eager to see oil and gas companies pay their fair share of the cost of climate damages, which disproportionately burden low-income communities and communities of color, and fund measures needed to help communities on the front line of the climate crisis adapt to the unavoidable climate harms. I would now like to turn it over to Rhonda Hamilton. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rhonda Hamilton. I'm an advisory neighborhood commissioner and a community leader within D.C. My community sits in the shadow of the U.S. Capitol, just about a mile here, and it's located right near Nats Park and D.C. United Soccer Stadium. The families in my community are working hard to make ends meet, just as so many other low and middle income families, as gas and utility prices rise and fluctuate beyond their means. As I'm speaking here today, there are many families enduring a daily struggle to figure out how to put and keep food on the table to feed their children. It is so sad when families can't afford to buy enough food daily and when children return home to empty kitchen cupboards and refrigerator. Where is the hope for these families? As they are facing harsh realities and making difficult choices to survive, Big Oil is gouging them at the pump so that they can enrich their wealthy shareholders and CEOs. The hardships for these families do not end with financial ones. Many of them are just like my communities in Buzzard Point in Southwest, where we're living every day near environmental hazards that are polluting the air and reducing our life expectancy and causing us to have asthma, COPD, and heart disease. These industrial facilities include cement plants and power plants. We have been fighting for years for environmental justice. The lives and healths of these families are not a priority for this city, just as the financial well-being of families is not a priority for Big Oil. Big oil companies will proudly unveil a combined profit of over $190 billion, while working families are financially devastating and bear the biggest burden. I stand here today in solidarity with all families and communities everywhere that are facing and fighting injustices and inequalities. The oil and gas industry be held accountable for profiting while polluting. They shall also be held accountable for the inexcusable harm that they have caused. It's time to hold these companies accountable. It's time to ease the burdens placed on these families by the high prices of gas and utility. Rather than bring down prices by stabilizing supply or investing in clean energy, big oil companies are using these massive profits for record stock buybacks to enrich their CEOs and wealthy shareholders, while families are facing evictions and worried about how they're going to pay and catch up on their utility bills. These companies are taking away income that is desperately needed by these families by making them pay higher prices for gasoline and for their utilities. Some of these families have lost hope today as they watch their hard-earned incomes not be able to stretch any further to meet their needs. These families include Miss Bernadette, who is working as hard as she can to care for her 3 children. While her full-time job does not equate to enough earnings to pay for food, rent, utilities, and child care costs. It's time to stop these companies from taking away from these families as the price of everything from eggs to medication is going up. Rather than them bringing down prices by stabilizing supply or investing in clean energy, big oil companies are using their massive profits for record stock buybacks to enrich their CEOs and wealthy shareholders. This is not fair, and it is not right that they have failed to ease the financial suffering that their pricing has placed on these families. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert Weissman, President of Public Citizen. ExxonMobil is imposing a private corporate tax on the American people. Chevron is imposing a private corporate tax on the American people. BP is imposing a private corporate tax on the American people. Shell is imposing a private corporate tax on the American people. It's the worst kind of possible tax. It takes from working people, from everyday Americans, and concentrates wealth in the rich and the CEOs of these companies. It doesn't invest money to get us to renewable energy and transition us to the clean energy future we need. It entrenches the fossil fuel industry, which is driving us to climate chaos. Chevron and Exxon alone have given us 90 billion reasons to impose a windfall profits tax to take back this money that has been extracted from American consumers and return it to them. The industry overall is going to give us 200 billion reasons to impose a windfall profits tax and return it to the American people, this money that's been taken from them by the big oil companies, private corporate tax. There is absolutely nothing radical about this idea. Spain has figured out they can do it. Greece has figured out they can do it. Italy's figured out they can do it. The European Union has figured out they can do it. As Senator Whitehouse said, even Boris Johnson's United Kingdom has figured out it can do it. We are lucky to have champions for consumer rights and working people and climate justice and common sense. Senators Whitehouse and Merkley and Markey and Representatives Khanna and Tlaib. It is time now for the Congress to act, to finally impose a windfall profits tax, to take this ill-gotten money from big oil, return it to the American consumers from whom it never should have been taken in the first place.
So I just really want to thank folks that humanize this, because I think that's sometimes what's missing when we look at these profit reports and these big CEOs and these shareholder payouts, is what does it really mean for the residents and the people we fight for? They believe in fairness. They believe in making sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to do and it doesn't impact people negatively. It is incredibly unfair to allow our residents and folks to fall victim to the corporate greed that's within the gas and oil companies around our country. And I got to tell you, as somebody that's literally surrounded by petroleum refineries, all those folks, we pay the toll not only at the gas pump in the quality of life from a number of wraparound services that many of my schools and communities need, but we also pay the price in our public health. So many of my families are suffering because we have to pay the toll. While they get the big brownfield credits, tax credits, giveaways at the state and local level, that doesn't even get counted in this conversation. It's about time they pay their fair share. I'm sick and tired of my residents coming up to me and saying, we're just giving them permission to pollute and make money off of our backs. I'm tired of going into the classroom in March Reading Month, and when they ask, what do I do? Because they're just learning the 3 branches of government. And I tell them I fight for clean air, and I say to them, you know, how many of you all have asthma? And a third of the class will raise their hand. But what's really missing is for us in our role, because I know outside of Congress, we have a tremendous amount of support for these proposals and making sure they are taxed properly. They have to pay their fair share because we are paying the toll. Again, not because only at the pump, but also with our quality of life and our public health. And, you know, with that, I just cannot thank enough the incredible leadership in the Senate who's really been courageous in pushing back on this narrative around this is a tax on those that can pay. I promise you that. But our residents can't continue to pay. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Representative Tlaib, and for everybody that spoke here today. I would just close by saying that, as you've heard, this is going to be a top priority this year to hold this industry accountable. Stop the Oil Profiteering works with hundreds of environmental justice, climate, consumer advocacy groups. And these profits this year have been a real alarm, a wake-up call for all of us that this needs to be a top priority going forward for the entire climate community, not only to support the clean energy work that this Congress has passed last year, but to also take the next step of actually holding big oil accountable and getting money back into the pockets of hardworking Americans and bringing justice to the families that Representative Tlaib and Rhonda and everybody else we're talking about. So we're going to keep up this fight. We're going to keep pushing in the House and Senate and all across this country to finally hold this industry accountable. So I know our representatives and senators have to run, but I think we might have minute for a couple questions, so let's take one.
For Senator Whitehouse and Senator Markey, do you guys have anything you can say about what the Senate Democratic agenda could look like that would incorporate this legislation and these priorities and put them sort of front and center?
Yeah, well, we still have control in the Senate.
Right.
We can still guide where our committees go, and we actually have a better control than we did before in a 50-50 Senate. So we can continue to drive the climate agenda. We know that we have the public behind us. We know that the other side is actually deliberately lying, and we can prove many of those lies. So it's really a question of will and emphasis and putting enough pressure on so that the new fossil fuel-funded masters of the House feel that pressure in their home communities and will agree to pass common sense laws that can avert climate chaos and put a little bit of fairness back into the economic structure that these big oil companies are taking such unfair advantage of.
Are you hopeful there's a vote on this?
Oh, yeah.
On the floor?
Very much.
All right.
Eddie, anything to add?
And I'll just say that there is no embarrassment on the part of the oil and gas industry in terms of their taking money from consumers and then giving it over to their shareholders. They're not embarrassed. But they do have one of the highest prevarication coefficients in American corporate history in terms of the crocodile tears which they're shedding as they're looking for more relief from the United States House and Senate. So we're starting here today just to bring the truth of this issue to the American people. They're going on the offensive to try to roll back the protections which we put in place. We're going on the offensive in order to make them accountable, and Senator Whitehouse's legislation is at the top of that agenda. And we're going to front and center make it very clear to the American people that we know they're being ripped off, and we have legislation to make sure that through tax relief we will get that funding back into their pockets. So thank you all so much. Thanks for being here.
I'm just wondering if the plan is a tax, how do we prevent, what's the plan to prevent that tax from being passed right back on consumers?
the oil industry will, in fact, lose the revenues through the taxation. And then our job will be to make sure that money gets redirected into renewable energy subsidies. That's going to be a part of the equation, and we will have to work in order to create that message in the same way we did in 2021 and 2022, in creating a formula that ultimately is leading to the opening up of this incredible vehicle, oil, solar, wind, battery storage technology revolution.
Excellent. Well, with that, I think we're going to close things out. But thank you all so much for coming. Thank you again to all of our speakers. We're going to keep up the fight. We're going to keep pushing for this. And this is going to be a big fight over the coming months and the coming years. So we're going to get back to work, and let's go get them. Thank you all.